Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they're not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Daphne Bernicker, who is an emotional intelligence expert and Vistage chair. Welcome, Daphne.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you very much for having me.
Daphne and I met through the Colorado Thought Leaders Forum and then had a breakfast. And now we've had, 4 or 5 chats since then. So it's been kind of funny when you meet someone that you really connect with, and then it's just a series of snowballing. We're going to pause for a moment to hear from a very happy Life Story Curator client.
I'm a client of Life Story Curator, and I reached out to Kathy to do my husband's 50th birthday book. And I chose to use Kathy because I've seen her work, and of course I've known her for a long time, and I knew that the product would be way above standard. I've done books myself, and I knew that she would do an exemplary job. The process working with Kathy is very organized, and we started off with interviewing me, coming up with a deeper analysis of who my husband is. And through that process, we came up with things I would never thought of on my own with just her asking certain questions. It triggered memories and special things that really added a great deal of value when we went to put the book together. And I hadn't remembered all these things when I first talked to her about it. So having that interview was great. When my husband opened the book on his birthday, he was nervous, of course, at first, and then very excited and quite emotional. That he's from New Zealand, and so having family represented from so far away in this book was really, really special. And I know that family and friends from afar were pleased to be able to be part of this process. And I couldn't have done, half the job that Kathy did, particularly in the time frame. And it was just beautifully presented. And she captured him very well, and she helped me sort of narrow down the focus and the amount of photos, and it couldn't have been any better.
I'd like to start with the icebreaker question. So, Daphne, if you would, tell us where you grew up in the country or the world, and where you are in birth order in your family, and how you think those two things, the geography, but also the birth order, affected you as a person.
Oh, fascinating questions. So I was born and grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, specifically Trinidad. My family is actually from the Cayman Islands for hundreds and hundreds of years, but through a series of events, I was born in Trinidad. And in terms of birth order, I am an only child. So how do I think those affected me? I think being from Trinidad and Tobago gives me a little bit different perspectives because I am very aware, I think, of different types of cultures. And also, Trinidad is a very diverse country. It's about 50% people originally from Africa, 50% people originally from India, and then there's a small percentage of all these other types of people, and everybody gets along really well.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Especially,
and especially at Carnival, then everybody really gets along very well.
Oh.
But there's a lot of, I think there's just sort of a general tolerance and appreciation for people as they are, and that's something that is important to me. So in terms of birth order, gosh, well, I think being an only, you get to be both like the one who's the conformist and the one who's the rebel all at the same time.
You get to be all of the personalities.
Yeah, exactly. So certainly it's made me very responsible, but it also has given me a desire to be creative and push the edge and understand what else is out there.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I will say you are my first and probably only right now in 140 some interviews of Trinidad and Tobago.
Ah,
That's kind of like, oh, that's very interesting. Okay. So Daphne, then growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, what did you do for fun? I mean, were you music? Was it more school for you? Was it plays, sports? What was growing up like?
oh gosh. So growing up, I really, in my family, we emphasized a lot of like school. So school was
Mm,
very important. Education was very important in my family. So that was kind of my focus. And then for fun, going to the beach, swimming, hanging out with friends, going to the pool, um, just generally kind of wandering around, because in those days you kind of could wander around.
yeah. So
So
it's maybe a lot of exploring. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Very interesting. All right. Well, we're gonna shift gears a little bit here. Would you say you're an introvert, an extrovert, or are you kind of that ambivert that's right in the middle?
I'm an ambivert. There are moments when I love to be with people. Whenever I'm in a situation like this, I'm absolutely loving it. And when I get to hang out in social settings, I'm very excited. But I'm also equally happy when I'm just kind of by myself, just kind of getting my energy from regrouping and just thinking whatever I need to think and getting organized. And yeah,
So comfortable in both worlds. Yeah, I would say I'm
yeah.
I'm the same. COVID
Mm.
did teach me I was more of an extrovert than I thought. Once we got so isolated, I was like, whoa, I need more people than I thought. Of course, maybe being an entrepreneur taught me that too, because you do spend so much more time alone, whereas in a corporate setting, you're in that your time is not your own a lot, and when you're in a leadership role too, a lot of times. So okay, enough about that. On the fun meter scale of
Mm.
1 to 5, 1 being a couch potato and 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Depends on if I'm at a party or not. So if I'm at a party, I think I'm, pretty close to the 10. Don't hold me to this. And if I'm at home, I kind of got two speeds in my life, on and off. And so if I'm at home, I'm more of a, okay, I'm just gonna chill here. That can be very fun, not at a party, with just like doing stuff with people, I guess.
Uh, okay. And then on the risk meter, in terms of
Mm.
taking risks, same scale, 1 to 5. Are you a low risk taker, or 5? It would be a high risk taker. How do you play there?
Well, I would normally say I'm probably a 4, but now that I'm living in Colorado, what I've noticed is my 4 is probably a Colorado 3 or 2 or something like that. I do enjoy challenge a lot. I enjoy doing things because I don't know what's going to happen. Um, because I figure I'm going to learn something along the way.
Yeah, well, it is funny. A lot of people do reference the what I think I am versus how I compare to others. There's the whole professional risk versus personal, and then there's the whole adventure junkie, right? Who's like, "Oh, I jump out of planes," and others are like, "But I'm a CPA and I would never, do professional things that were outside the scope of that." So anyway, I love all of those questions because it gives us a little bit of background about who you are on a personal level. And then we
Mhm.
get to hear about your story and how that kind of plays out. So tell us, if you would, what it's like to be an emotional intelligence expert and Vistage chair. And then we'll get into how did I get here?
Hmm. Okay. So those are two pieces of me that I think are quite close together. To give you all and you'll get more of this, but I have a background, a financial background, and for one reason or another, took a turn into this world, which is executive coaching, corporate culture, leadership development, specifically with a focus on emotional intelligence. And as an emotional intelligence expert, I have worked with 6 Seconds, which is the leading international emotional intelligence network, to co-create an assessment of how people motivate themselves and how that directly affects their success personally and professionally.
Mm.
And a process to help people very quickly understand how they're driving themselves and whether or not that's working, and to very quickly be able to make changes. So it's a very it turned out to be much more powerful than I expected. It's a very it's a type of tool that lets people quite quickly go to a completely different space and start moving forward much more strongly. So the way I like think about it is deeper insight, powerful shift, better life. And that's really what I'm all about. That's what I'm doing with my Vistage practice as well. So in the Vistage world, I am what is known as the Vistage Chair, which means that I have the great good fortune of working with some extraordinary leaders who are business owners, founders, CEOs of companies, small to lower middle market size companies, and helping them and their organizations to grow and to be more successful, again, both personally and professionally. And what I've been very fortunate to be able to do is to bring together the kinds of people that I like to be around, that inspire me. And those are people who are high integrity, they care about excellence and execution, and they're really focused also on lifting other people up. So it's just wonderful to see how they all support each other, the knowledge they bring into that space, and they're a lot of fun. And to see their lives and their companies grow is wonderful also, because they influence a lot of other people. So as they go and their companies go, that makes a lot of difference to the community as well.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like you surround yourself with smart, successful, interesting people, but then you also help them. How can they get better even then? And I like what you said it earlier when you said something about what drives us,
Mm-hmm.
and is it working for us? Because how many times do we kind of end up on that autopilot and you get triggered by the juice that goes with starting the new project or saying yes or doing whatever, and only to find out now you've got 17 things going on and maybe you're exhausted and can't give it your all. So wow,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Well, I have to ask, when you were a young person, like junior high, high school, were you thinking, oh, someday I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to be a leader of leaders or a convener of leaders? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh gosh, that is a very interesting question. So back then, I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist, probably,
Mm,
or a clinical psychologist. And then when I was in undergrad, my undergrad was actually biochemistry and psychology, all of which fed straight into that. And then I got to the point where um, I was super exhausted. I actually took the MCAT, did well, and I was like, I didn't have the money, frankly, and also felt the need to get out in the real world. So instead of getting out in the real world, because this was back in '85 and this was Houston, Texas, what I did was go ahead and get an MBA. So I went straight through and got an MBA with a concentration in finance. And how all that happened, we can get into. But essentially, there wasn't such a field as coaching back then. In when I was a child. But had there been such a field, I think I would have been really drawn to it.
yeah, it's funny, when you think about when do we get exposed to coaches in business, right? Because there's coaches in sports, and there's always been, right? But when I thought about in business, when did that really start coming to be a thing? Was it the '90s then, or the early 2000s?
Something
But
like that, yeah.
you look at any of the, kind of any of the TV shows or some of the social aspects that shape us as a society, and it's not like, oh well, I had this coach and they really helped me. So interesting, yeah. How would you have heard about it as a young person, unless it was more, I think, in a sports environment, because that's what was mostly coaching. was more prevalent there. So, okay, so you get it's so funny because you're going down the psychology, which is one side of your brain, and then you went over to business, which is probably the other side of your brain. So now you get your MBA. You know, what was your first job then?
So my first job was with American General, which is, y'all know it as AIG. And I was a credit analyst. So I was responsible for doing all the analysis and all the recommendations on the entire fixed income investment grade portfolio, which was huge. It was billions of dollars, which was, I'm still stunned that they, let me have at it. Although I think I did a good job, but it's like, really? I mean, I just graduated. What do I know? But I had a great boss who was the portfolio manager, and I'd do my thing, and he'd go, "Well, what do you think? Should you buy this?" And I'd be like, "Yeah," and he'd go, "Okay, let's go buy 500 million or whatever." I'm like, but I guess what I learned actually from that experience, again, not having had the benefit of assessments or any of those things, is that it was super interesting to do one time around, like you're analyzing each company one time around. And then the whole job was to do that quarterly or semi-annually or something. And I'm just not a person that enjoys repetitive tasks. So intellectually interesting, yes. But I like to do things also that are new. So had I had the benefit, for example, of a Myers-Briggs assessment before taking that particular role, I might have thought twice about it, because I love the people. It just wasn't interesting to me on an ongoing basis, shall we say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you don't even know that when you're young, right? You're like, I just need to get a job. I need to get my foot in the door. And this is in my line of work, right? Having an MBA.
Exactly.
So how
Yeah.
did you even get the job? I mean, was it someone that you knew that helped you get that foot in the door? Or was it just, I mean, I know back then a lot of times it was you just applied and they
Yeah. So my undergrad and graduate degree are from Rice. So I went to the Jones School, and different companies came through, and American General interviewed me, and I thought what they suggested sounded interesting, and it just wasn't interesting on a continual basis, like I said, for me anyway. And so I really didn't know anybody there, but the people were super nice, and just good, very smart human beings. So it's certainly a very good match from that perspective.
Yeah. So how long did you kind of stick it out when you were kind of like starting to recognize this is not very interesting anymore? And then, I mean, did you get promoted there? Or did you find another job there? Or what did you think about once you finally kind of went, oh, I have to do this again? It was interesting first time around. Now I have to do it every quarter.
Well, so in terms of promotion, I mean, there really wasn't like a path to that, because you're an analyst, or then you have and then my boss had like me and remember mortgage-backed securities? That was the other person in the group, right? So, and then there was somebody kind of over that, and then there was a portfolio manager, and then there was the private placement, junk area as well. But so I stuck around, I think, for about 2.5 years. And that was really because I wanted to hit that mark. I had in my head that I needed to stay, for a legitimate amount of time. And then I started looking for something else that would be more to my liking, I guess.
Ah, okay. And where did that lead you to?
So I ended up at Cooper Industries. So this isn't funny, but when I was with American General, it was a Fortune 100. When I was with Cooper, it was a Fortune 100. Each time I left each of those companies, they dropped out of the Fortune 100. Not saying I'm responsible, but
I don't know. That's
and
two
I'm
data
not.
points. 100%, 2 data points.
I don't know. So I went to Cooper Industries, which you may or may not know as one of those sort of 1970s style conglomerates. So if you think of like Champion Spark Plugs, Cameron Iron Works, I'm just trying to think. I couldn't. lots of different, like basic manufacturing things all combined.
Okay.
So the idea was if they just got a bunch of manufacturing type, you know, companies and combine them, they could be run better overall by one organization.
One kind of parent group
Mhm.
maybe that oversaw that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there I was responsible for worldwide funding. And that was the other side of what I had been doing at American General. There I was issuing, you know, medium-term notes, negotiating with bankers for lines of credit, uh, creating and issuing all kinds of derivatives and commercial paper and doing swaps and organizing for borrowing in countries all over the world of all different types and doing the financial reporting and doing the forecasting. Anything to do with debt was under my, anything to do with borrowing money was under my sort of purview.
Oh, wow. That seems so different than what you were doing. How were you like qualified for that? I mean, were you confident going into that this is something I can do and learn, or was it that you had done a fair amount of that already?
Well, I mean, I certainly understood the other side of it because at American General, it's analyzing companies and, you know, making recommendations on whether or not to purchase securities. And on this side, I was creating securities or borrowing money and so forth.
Ah,
Um,
okay, okay.
and so, I mean, from my perspective, I don't really, I didn't consider whether or not I'd be qualified. I just figured I could do it. It was interesting to me,
Hmm.
and something I discovered along the way is I actually, even though I don't have a law degree, and wouldn't ever want to go to law school, I loved. This is weird. I loved being able to read, you know, and read the legal documents and make sure that they did what we wanted them to do because that's super important. And lots of times those things can be boilerplate. And if people don't look at them and pay attention, then you end up in a situation where you didn't want to be on occasion. So that was interesting.
Hmm. Okay.
I know it's
So
weird, isn't it?
yeah. Well, and again, this is the interesting thing about a lot of people's journeys is how you kind of start one direction, pivot here and there, change, and then what you're drawn to, right? How all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
you're like paying attention to, oh, this is a really fun part of my job, or man, this is a part I really don't like. So,
Mm-hmm.
so how
Yeah.
long were you there and working in that field?
So I was at um, Cooper Industries until I had my second child. So while I was there, I got married, had my first child, and then I had my son. And I said to my husband, who was, my hours were very long. And I said to my husband, whose hours were also very long, you know, that I really wanted to be able to stay home with the kids. My mom had not been able to stay home with me. Her hours had been very long, and I just didn't want that. And so he was at the time in his fellowship at MD Anderson. And I just kind of said, you know, I'd really like to be able to stay home with the kids. And he was like, okay, let's just do it. So I stayed home. We went into, you know, that time my savings, right? And was able to spend a good bit of time at home with the kids. And it turns out I'm not very good at being, you know, kind of just staying home. Uh, So I ended up still doing a lot of stuff. I just was doing it when my kids were asleep. So I was volunteering for this and doing that and all that kind of thing.
And probably not getting paid for those things.
No, no.
Yeah. And that is another pattern that I found with these interviews is the whole, oh, I want to stay home, and then, oh, it's driving me crazy, I need more. And
Mm.
love it. There's a whole aspect of it that is very fulfilling, but then there's something else there. So okay, so then I'm guessing then you went back, and is that when you decided you were more coaching, or did you go back to a corporate role?
So I went back. Um, so when our son was about 14, it felt like I needed to go back for various reasons. And so I started looking around to what could I go back to? Because when I left my role, it was a pretty high level role, doing what I thought were some really interesting things. Um, I just loved it. There was a lot of cool stuff going on, and I was doing a lot of cutting edge stuff. And so what I discovered, no surprise to probably most people listening here, is if you leave something like that and, are out of that space, it's impossible to go back 14 years later to the same space. So when I started looking around, the opportunities that I came up with that, were presented to me were not necessarily things that I would have normally taken, but given that I wanted to get back out in the workplace, I needed to take something. And so I just was trying to figure out, okay, what's the thing, what's that thing that I can do? And I actually was having a couple of I had, several, I guess 3 different offers kind of all at the same time. I wasn't particularly looking, but I had those 3 different offers. And what happened is so funny to kind of think about. But what happened is one of the offers sort of had like that almost presumptive close, right? They're like, when you take the job, this is this is this. And I was like, and frankly, none of them were what I thought would be great fits. But I thought, I just need to get back, get my chops, and then I can go back and do something cool. Not that this isn't going to be interesting, but something that's more my natural fit. And so I reached out to some people I trusted and got some advice. And one of the people I reached out to actually was a coach. Because and he's like, this is like the second coach I knew. I mean, the word coaching had only just come into my sort of world. And I told him about these different offers, and he said to me, Daphne, if this company thinks that you're going to be taking this job, then you have to, because otherwise it goes against your integrity. And I had not I know, not interesting. And I had not led them to believe that at all, but that was kind of the thing. And he said that, and if you say the words integrity to me, I'm like, okay, I have to do this. So, so I took that job for that reason. And it was a lot. And it's funny because afterwards I spoke to him, and he actually called me up and said, I just want to say, I'm really, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that to you. And I was like, no, this is fine. I've learned a lot. So, and I know you were well intended, and I wasn't asking you as my coach anyway. So this was just kind of, curbside advice, so to speak, or whatever. But that was an interesting thing that was an interesting piece of advice that I took, which, definitely changed my path in a lot of ways, I think. Many of which are good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like maybe it was a hard path, but like you said, in the end, it was a good path because it got you on to the path where you are now, right?
Yeah, I would say that. So the entity I went to work for was very different than what I'd left. So they didn't have any of that sophisticated financial stuff, but what they needed was a massive change to, treasury, payroll, finance, accounting, training, everything. And that was interesting to me, kind of the idea of being able to help this organization transform. What I found was that the system, the accounting system they had was very antiquated. And, there were a lot of things when you step it, you're coming from a Fortune 100 company that's very cutting edge to something that is not. I learned, I really learned a lot about what it is like to work in a, smaller organization, and an organization that doesn't have all those tools. So going through that process was very interesting. I had to get a lot of people engaged, a lot of different parties engaged in changing things. And what I learned, or what kind of simultaneously happened is I was talking to this friend of mine, and she's like, "Oh, I'm taking a coaching course." I'm like, so what coaching course? Again, I heard about these other two coaches.
Uh-huh.
So there's a course you can take to do this. And she's like, yeah, I'm taking this coaching course. I'm like, what is it? And she told me, and I was like, I think I need to take that course too, because I want to be better at leading the people. I want to be better at leading the change, at leading the people, at being able to engage them, because, I think it's very common. I mean, the number is 70% of change efforts fail, but that's because people are engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so that was a very interesting piece that happened for me. And then I was really fascinated by that.
Yeah, because when you take on that coaching aspect of it and the training for something like that, it's you start looking at leadership as a thing, right? That you have, oh, well, how do I go about approaching this thing versus sometimes we tend to approach it as, here's who I am, and we just need to get this thing done. And it's like, no, there's ways to talk to different people. And yeah, it really breaks it down right into all these different aspects and different languages and different approaches. And yeah, I remember when I started getting exposed to change management, it was very different than the project management I had been exposed to. It's like, whoa, these elements are what I was needing. And that's exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, it's a very cool when those light bulbs start to go on, right? And then you're like, oh, well, this is where I want to be. So okay, so
Yeah.
you get certified as a coach, and then so does that help you then as you are navigating all this transformation?
It really did help me to be better at that, because I've heard it said, and I think it's very true. People, like, change doesn't have to be hard, right? People don't necessarily mind change. They mind being changed. So, if you can create a situation in which people are engaged in that change process and they define it themselves and they're excited about it, then that's a whole different thing, because that change is going to stick, because it's something that we've co-created. So that was very, very beneficial. And thank goodness, because that was a pretty tough project. It's funny. Another thing I learned in my sort of business evolution is that typically smaller companies, smaller situations are more challenging than bigger ones, because there's just, there's more room for personality. And oftentimes they don't have all of the tools. There's a lot more ability to be adept and adapt and move quickly, which is great. But it's not, nobody set it out for you, right? You get to create that path. So it's that's interesting to me as well. And just kind of seeing it. And like I said, I always think that the smaller the organization, whatever that is, or the smaller the team, the bigger the personality, the larger the effect is of each individual person. So that requires making sure we're kind of engaging everyone and bringing everyone together. And that requires being able to understand people too.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all in the people business, right?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
No matter what product we're creating or servicing or how we're doing things, we're in the people business, and it takes people to get stuff done, even if it's technology.
Yes.
Okay. So now you're working on this transformation project. Are you then moving on to the next project, next company? You'd already said that you kind of wasn't sure if this was going to be a fit. Did you then say, oh, now I want to do this on my own? What was kind of that tipping point for you?
So it was, and I don't mind hard work. I really don't. But my hours were in the change process. I was working sometimes 17 hours a day or more, 20. It was a lot, because it was this project and it had to get done. And my goal, I kind of said to myself when I started this, I would get them to where they needed to be. And then I would probably, look for something else. And the surprise, I guess, for me is that when I started taking this coaching course, that's when things really got exciting for me. That's when I was like, wow, this is a whole new field. It's very different. It's not finance, but it's very interesting to me. And I was talking to this friend of mine. She's actually my doctor. There I am. I'm there for my annual, and we're having conversations. How are things going? I'm like, wow, this is a lot. I'm really exhausted. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. I just want to get these people to completion, get them in a good spot, and then And she's like, Daphne, you know what? I have, I'm certain I can recommend or refer some of my patients to you, because I'm taking this life coaching course, or I have taken this life coaching course. Um, and I was like, great. And so she did. And that was my first sort of start, just kind of hanging up my shingle, and luckily having a really supportive dear friend referring people to me. And then I, met some people and so forth. But as I was going about this and feeling frankly kind of burnt out of the corporate world, I sort of said to myself, I'm never going back to corporate, whatever. I had a number of friends reach out to me and say, Daphne, this is ridiculous. You come from corporate, you come from that executive space. You should be doing, certainly executive coaching. You should be doing, transformation business and so forth. And I was like, no. And then my husband and I went to dinner with a, a friend and his wife. We've known them forever. And my husband did something that was very unusual. He took out my brand new business card and he goes, look, Daphne has a new gig. And so our friend was like, oh, Daphne, I think I could really use you in my business. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I went, it took several months to kind of connect with each other, but turned out that what he needed, he had maybe a 5-year-old energy trading company. He was out there being a rainmaker, doing very well, and he had somebody inside the company that he wanted to develop as the leader to basically to be the president, essentially. This guy was 28, maybe 29, and the third person in the door, like, the CEO, his assistant, and then this guy who was the, next door neighbor of the assistant, and several other people. So my friend wanted him to become this leader, and he was an introvert. We talked about introvert, extroverts before, and he was really an introvert. And so he would write stuff up and give it to the other people who were all older than him, and they would kind of go, no, and that would be kind of it. And so what we did is we created a situation where we developed a cohort, him and some other people, and I came in and worked with them. And I'm so grateful for the trust I received, because I'd never really done this before. And my friend knew it too. They had never done this before. But I created a situation where we did leadership development for them with an emotional intelligence perspective, and created that culture with them. At the end of 6 months, they had changed how they thought about things. They knew now that they could lead the company in lots of different ways, and they knew how to communicate with each other and so forth. And so over time, they reached out, and we kind of created something where we did that same process for cohorts within the company and transformed the company. And actually, I presented that as a case study at the Harvard Coaching Conference a while back, because it was such a, we could see and I'm a numbers person, right? So we could see the numbers of how things change at the company in terms of the soft skills and the culture and engagement and teamwork and customer service and, prospects of the future, as well as the other side, which was the actual financial performance. And it was tremendous. So that was great fun. And I love to do that. And that guy is still, they ended up selling the company, doing extremely well. He went and started another company. And that then 28-year-old just turned 40 something, 41, 40. And he is in my Vistage group today still. So, and such an inspiring leader. So that's been great fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great story. I love that the whole, the insight into each of their own emotional intelligence, and then how to bring that forward. And, most people, I know when I first learned about emotional intelligence, the same thing was like, whoa, again, now I have a language, I have a process, there's a framework around this. I can work with this. I can see how it interacts with people and how I'm going to, apply it, etc. So, when you do get that first learning, that's just, then it sounds like you really just unleashed this leader to be so different maybe than how he was, in terms of confidence and presentation and presence and all of that. So, wow, very cool. So were you doing a toe in the water, I'll do this little life coaching while I still keep the corporate gig. I mean, because you were working so many hours a day. What then gave you the courage to say, or maybe it wasn't courage, it was exhaustion. Hey, I got to really go out on my own.
I reached the milestone I set for myself, which was that I wanted to be able to get this company where it needed to be. I wanted to fulfill my obligation to them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Back to your
then,
integrity.
yeah. And then I was like, okay, this is it. I've done what I could do without permanently damaging myself here. I'm tired and I need to do something that fills me up more than this. Not that that wasn't a great job. It just wasn't the right fit for me. So that's what did it. And I will say though that took a lot. The working with other company took a lot out of me. I've learned certainly some lessons, and some of that I think went into what I did in terms of creating this what I call the EQ plus motivation profile. How assessing how we motivate ourselves and how that affects our lives. What I thought about was what are these beliefs that drive us,
Mm-hmm.
and how does that affect everything we do and how we show up. And one of my some things that you can probably tell about me is integrity is paramount. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that's important. Another thing that for me showed up is that if as I said, if I commit to something, I'm going to do it. But what I've noticed is that sometimes things on the ground change. So if the facts on the ground change, an evolution for me has been, if my gut's telling me that this isn't right, even though, in this case, I hadn't really said I was going to, but even though I said I was going to go in this direction, if something is off, I don't have to fulfill that anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I've given my word. So I want to honor my word, but something has changed, like you said, on the ground. So I need to really assess what's going on here. And does it still make sense to finish or to complete or to keep going in this direction? I mean, a lot of facts can change where you're like, this is no longer a viable
Right.
product, right? Or this is no
Yeah.
longer a viable feature or solution or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's not really serving anybody other than, me going, yeah, I kept my word, then why am I doing it? It just doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. Right. So again, there's a lot of things around belief systems and how we see ourselves, which is very helpful. And that's part of this process is very quickly understanding what are my belief systems and how did they help me get here? And how is it still helping me, or are there some things I need to modify?
Yeah.
I mean, the gist of it really is that I think a lot of times we don't, whatever we believe, whatever we think, whatever we believe, we actually think is true. And we seldom question those beliefs, right? Because they're true. And we also think everybody else believes what we believe, or that they should believe what we believe. So it's a great opportunity to kind of dig in and see that. It's been very enlightening. I'm always listening, as probably you are, Kathy, to what people believe about themselves and how that's working for them or not. And that can make a huge difference in just understanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my beliefs that I had to work hard to overcome was that I'm not good enough. And I don't know, is that one of the elements in your tool? And then if you
Yeah.
believe that, then you believe other people think you're not, like you just said. Well, other people probably think that too, or they're going to find out. That's that back into that
Mhm.
imposter syndrome thing that I
Yeah,
don't know
sure.
the name for that, but it's yeah. So how do you just move through life doing and not be thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, and then assessing that or putting meaning onto things that really have no meaning. It's just a matter of moving forward on a project or a direction or an idea. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, absolutely. I think that's true. I think that I'm not good enough, or um, you know, um, lack of self-confidence, that can drive a lot of things. And that's part of you're right. That is one of the aspects of, like, how do you rate yourself in terms of self-confidence? And that, it's normed against a bunch of people. It's not just you. It's not like a Cosmo quiz. But what that does is sometimes the belief system emerges that like I'm only as good as how many, billable hours I have, or, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What's the measurement? What's the measurement for that in each situation? Right. Yeah. Mine was always whatever leader was in the room, and that was my measurement. I'm like, well, which is not always
and I
accurate.
think that's not necessarily uncommon for women. And I think it is exhausting
yeah.
to like base one's self-esteem on someone or something that has, really doesn't know and isn't that's and has no and just isn't connected to you, right? So starting from a place of self-acceptance and self-appreciation is huge, as we both know now that we're older women.
What's the opposite of that on your tool?
The opposite of self-esteem, lack of self-esteem.
No, I mean the opposite of that person that's if I'm not good enough, then I see those leaders that are I'm a small businessman genius, the whole it's not the narcissist or the and maybe there are a lot of people who are the founders, that they just know that their idea is going to work and they've had success, but then at some point they reach a point where it's like, okay, it's not working.
That is another that's another great aspect. What I've noticed is again, there's the understanding of like what your belief system is and how it's showing up for you. So if you were to ask me, I don't think it's possible to think too well of yourself. That may be a very radical statement, but I don't think it's possible. I think it's important to have a healthy sense of self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I also think that it is important to be able to observe what's going on with other people and to take into account what's going on with other people, because otherwise you're missing a lot of information. Much of it, frankly, can be emotional information, right? But because that's a big way we gather information, like what are people reacting to and so forth. So what I see sometimes, what I've observed sometimes with, for example, really good salespeople is they have very high self-esteem, entrepreneurs do, because you got to get up and do it again, right? Important is to blend that with empathy, because if you're not taking into account what else is going on with other people, you can, essentially oftentimes overcome people, salespeople that just beat you into the ground of submission. That's one kind. I think even better than that, the truly extraordinary leaders, and I put, salespeople and extraordinary leaders, it's all about influencing people, right? Mm-hmm. I think those truly extraordinary people are able to blend the emotional intelligence skills, obviously self-esteem is important, of empathy, understanding how other people feel and navigating their own emotions. So being able to, if you understand how other people feel and you're not great at navigating your own emotions, and I'll tell you, that's a journey that I've worked on. It can be very easy to be overwhelmed by others or to try and do for others, to try and fix or whatever that is. But if you're settled in that like self-esteem and also being able to navigate your own emotions, manage your emotions to achieve the results that you want, that's a whole different thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well, we've kind of gone down this EQ path.
Yeah, I guess we did.
Because it's such a big part of your journey. So I'm going to take us back to your journey a little bit.
Yeah.
So you had those first clients, and then now you're in Denver. So tell us about how you got to Denver, and then we're going to have to start wrapping up, even though I know I can keep going with you.
Yeah. Okay. So got to Denver because my husband took a job here. He wanted to expand what he does. I think that you probably learned that he's an oncologist. So he is the director of medical oncology for the medical oncology service line at the Common Spirit system. And we're very excited to be here. It's, this gives an opportunity to help grow oncology care here in Colorado, Utah, and Western Kansas. And also we get to meet awesome people and play in the mountains and all that good stuff. So it was an adjustment, but I have to say it's been a tremendous opportunity to get to meet some of the nicest and kindest people I've ever met.
Well, very cool. Well, we're glad you're here. So which means then you have to kind of start your business over, right? Because you're well
Yeah.
established in Houston and now you're starting a new network. So, but hopefully I can help you with that. There's a lot of people here in the community that will help you with this. Okay,
I
well, let's.
look forward to that and happy to help anyone I can because really my mission in life is to keep things better than I found things to help make the world a better place. I know that's soft, but it's important to me, and so I do that in whatever way I can.
Great aspirations, right? Okay, so two wrap-up questions. The first
Yeah.
is share with us what you think served you best throughout your career/life, and it can be a personality trait, a characteristic, a strength, a discipline. What do you think served you best?
I'm very tenacious.
Mm, okay, very tenacious. I like that.
And I usually think things are going to turn out well.
Ah,
I usually think I can, somehow or other, I'm going to make it turn out well.
I like that. I had another interviewee who said that she never had the worry gene. She just was always like, everything's going to work. And she just went through life that way. And you know what? Big surprise. Everything just worked for her. I'm like, wow, I think I somehow inherited the worry gene and I didn't know it until a certain point. I'm like, why am I worried about this? And, that my brain tended to be that critical. This isn't going to work. So I like to hear when people have that. I tend to think that it's going to work out and then it will. So
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is I'm creative. I always like to find, whatever the solution is, whatever it is that is maybe a little bit different perspective that can help advance the situation or help the person advance is where I think I do a pretty good job.
okay. All righty. Well, last wrap up question then. Any words of wisdom that impacted you when you were maybe at a time you felt stuck, overwhelmed, starting over? Any words of wisdom?
Um, so I guess what I'd say is that um, my mother had the phrase, bloom where you're planted. And I've thought about that a lot. And I've had the great good fortune of meeting a lot of super interesting, oftentimes quite successful people in my line, in my line of work. I've had that opportunity to meet people. And specifically thinking about moving to Denver, one of the things that I have really focused on is being comfortable in my own skin wherever I am.
Ah,
And so that's actually what I would call a rule. Um, so um, one of, looking at my assessment, one of those things is belonging, right?
mm,
And so whether or not you feel like you belong, or whether or not I feel like I belong, is really internally generated.
yeah. I mean, um, there's no external measure of that, right? It's got to be internal.
So just, deciding wherever I am, I belong at that time, has
Hmm.
been a very important piece for me. And I wouldn't say I've always felt that way by any means, but that is definitely a rule. Again, part of my work is helping people to understand what are their rules and how are they working or not working. And the cool thing is, once you see that rule, you made it. Like
Yeah,
I literally made my own rule, so I can make
yeah,
another one.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's recognizing that you have that rule, you made it up, and like you said, how it's driving you and then is it really serving you? Yeah, the patterns that we create in life, yeah, are they really serving us? And some do
yeah,
tremendously, and then some that are just that little anchor, pulls you backwards. So
change it on it for a Wednesday. If Wednesday you want to have a different rule, make the rule for Wednesday, whatever it is. But make, if you want a different rule, it's the world's your oyster. So at least that's my rule for this season.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Daphne, so much for sharing your
Thank you.
story today and all of this wisdom. I mean, it's so great to be able to hear stories and kind of figure out what the pieces and parts are that we can relate to and use. So love that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity, and I'm so loving getting to know you as well. I'm really fascinated by you and your journey, and looking forward to getting to know each other better.
Well, we've got some things coming up on the books that will get scheduled. So awesome.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below so that you'll be alerted as other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Daphne, you can find this interview on my website, lifestorycurator.com. And under the blog section is where I'll post this interview. And I'll also post Daphne's social media information if you'd like to get a hold of her, should you be looking for an EQ coach or a Vistage chair. So on that note, I'll say stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories. Have a great day.